And that's why first is that the objective is that when we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's an objective to be lengthy in one's worship to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we look at the principles of Islam as an example. We look at the principle of dhikr, the principle of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, as we made mention of, that the principle there is about being of those who are abundant in dhikr and lengthy in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like salah, you look at the principle of salah. Likewise, it's about being lengthy. Like the Prophet ﷺ, kana yutawwil salah. The Prophet ﷺ, as an example, he has two types of prayer. He has a public prayer and he has a private prayer. The only public prayer of the Prophet ﷺ is the khamsa salawat. Those 5 salawat, they're public. He always prays them in public ﷺ in the masjid. As for the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, he always prays them in private sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. I.e., another way you look at it, any prayer in terms of tashri'ah that is jama'ah, that is communal, the Prophet will always pray a communal prayer in public. That's a sign that it's a public prayer. Any prayer in which the tashri'ah, in which legislation is non-communal, then the Prophet ﷺ always prays that in private. In terms of his communal prayer, ﷺ, it's always mabnun ala al-khiffa. It's always based upon lightness, brevity of the prayer. He's always brief, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And if you hear some type of disturbance in the prayer, especially from children, he'll make his prayer even briefer, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We prayed behind the Rasul, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to the point that we said, did he even bow? Did he even prostrate? That's how brief his prayer can be, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Very swift in the movements in terms of what? Communal public prayers. But when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is in private, alan yutawwil. This is when the Prophet ﷺ makes the prayer lengthy. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Hatta yatawarrama qadama. As in the hadith of Aisha, the hadith of Sayyidina Mughira ibn Shu'bah in Bukhari, until his feet begin to swell up and crack. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, due to the tool al-qiyam, due to the length in which he stands worshipping his Lord. The point what Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala wants is that worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is meant to be lengthy. Because it's meant to be you tasting the sweetness of commune with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when somebody tastes the sweetness of something, they desire to remain therein. Okay? So it becomes more lengthier and lengthier and lengthier. But he's saying, but when somebody fills his stomach, then it's going to sever that desire from the root. In and of itself, the 7th benefit of the lengthy acts of worship are made easier. I.e., through satiation, the lengthy acts of worship are made far more difficult. Okay? And you can also see that in terms of societal, like what we heard from our teachers, is that when we look at Muslim society, you can see the societies that took to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, societies in which the sunnah of Allah subhanahu of the Prophet sallallahu is rooted in those societies by virtue of their relationship with food. So when we find societies that have a cuisine, as an example, and then an elaborate cuisine, that is a sign of people straying. The society, as a society, it's strayed from the asl of the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you find societies that have a very simple cuisine or even a lack of cuisine, period, then you're going to find these are societies that replaced physical food with spiritual food. If you're asking for a cookbook, they'll give you a book of dhikr, a book of awrad, a book of litanies. That's what they know how to cook up. They know how to cook up ways of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what are attaching to Him. You say the Imams of Hadramaut hakada, you go to a place like Tarim, they have zero cuisine, none, zero cuisine. Like the basic food that they eat, most of it came from Indonesia, came from Malaysia, and it's references of them. But Asl of Tarim, zero. They have no cuisine whatsoever. He said because all of their effort was in du'as, all of their efforts was in litanies, all of their efforts was in ways of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you see the same elaborate way that many cultures have, like, you know what I mean, you go to, like, for instance, Shami culture or even Turkish culture as an example, they have very elaborate ways of with food. But if you try to understand the elaborate nature of food that certain cultures have, then you try to transpose that onto sort of societies of spirituality, you find that they are more elaborate with ways of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, they have ways of dhikr, they'll have ways of salah, Allahu Akbar, they'll have ways of giving in charity, ways, if'al al-khair. They'll use the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa'amil al-khair, just do good. Allah ta'ala says, so the verb here, al al-itlaq. Okay, meaning that verb is a very principial verse in terms of worship. When Allah Ta'ala just says, do good. Everyone got the point by that? When Allah Ta'ala says, do good, He didn't say what type of good. He didn't stipulate this type of good, that type of good, that type of good. He said, just do good. So the ulama see that as a basis. We're going to do good We're going to be very elaborate in trying to, or very sort of dexterous in trying to bring about elaborate ways of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except if the Sharia thereby comes to curtail it. Do you get the point? Do you understand like a principle? Like in Usul, the Usuliyun, radiallahu anhum, the people of Usul, they argue about the principle of legislation, the Asl. And so some of the radiallahu anhum, some say that al-Asl huwa al-Ibaha. And the basis of everything is permissibility until proven otherwise. Others say al-Asl huwa al-Hurma. The basis of everything is Hurma. It's impermissible until proven otherwise. Some of them will split it. Some will say al-Asl huwa al-Ibaha fil mu'amalat. So in trade, you're dealing with people, the basis is what? Is permissibility until proven otherwise, then it becomes haram. But in ibadat, the asl is what is hurma, until proven otherwise. The imams of spirituality, there's like the type of asl is just doing good. It's ibaha, until proven otherwise by the shara in and of itself, okay? Point being is that they're more interested in the cuisine of the heart. Radiallahu ta'ala anhum wa radahum.